Gemini monsters are a series of cards which were released in 2007, and were unique effect monsters which had the effect to be treated as a normal monster while face up on the field or in the graveyard. And you could normal summon the card again while it was on the field in order to be treated as an effect monster in order to gain its effect. The way this was supposed to work out was that they would have a very good effect to justify 2 summons required to use them, and they could gain benefit from normal monster support. Although Konomi forgot to give them those really good effects part, so they kind of fell flat and never really hit the mark. Let's take a look at GOGGLE Golem. This is a rock monster with 1500 attack and has the effect that when it's Gemini summoned, you set its original attack to 2100. Back in the days of 2007, Cyber Dragon had already been out in the game for 2 years, and was a monster that could special summon itself from your hand with 2100 attack, so its effect was already kind of power crept out the gate, as you'd have to use up resources to get GOGGLE Golem on the field and then activate its good effect, where Cyber Dragon didn't use any of your summons and had the same benefits immediately, and was definitely a game changer because of it. There's also Phantom DRAGONRAY BRONTO, which had 1500 attack baseline, although could be Gemini summoned in order to set its attack to 2300. But if it attacked, it's changed the defense position until the end of your next turn. Goblin Attack Force, which was released in 2002, has literally the same exact effect, with the same attack point value. A lot of the Gemini monsters in the first wave were like this, just straight up worse version of cards that already existed. However, they did also release a lot of new normal monster support along with the first wave of Gemini monsters. So, it made sense why they thought it would be super easy for them to gain all of their effects. For one, in the set which introduced Gemini monsters, we also got the card Double Summon in the game. Double Summon is a card which actually saw competitive play because it just gives you 1 extra normal summon during your turn. The intended synergy with this card in Gemini monsters is pretty obvious. It would allow you to use the Gemini monster's effect immediately. Although, let's go over the normal monster support that was also released. Only a handful of months before Gemini monsters, they released Birthright in Ancient Rules. Birthright allows you to special summon a normal monster from your graveyard in attack position, and is basically like a Call the Haunted except only for normal monsters. And this was back when Call the Haunted was still a staple card that was played in pretty much every deck. So, gaining more access to Call the Haunteds was a bonus back then. Ancient Rules allows you to special summon a level 5 or higher normal monster from your hand, which should have helped along some of the higher level Gemini monsters, like Grass Chopper, which actually had a decent effect of being able to attack all of your opponent's monsters once each. However, Gemini monsters were not treated as normal monsters while in the hand, even though there were other cards that did have this distinction, like Simorgh, Bird of Ancestry, which would be released shortly after the first wave of Gemini monsters. So because Gemini monsters were only normal monsters while in the field or graveyard, this actually severely limited a lot of normal monster support they might have. Especially once we got really good normal monster support like Rescue Rabbit in 2011, which can special summon 2 normal monsters from your deck. And the set which did release the Geminis also had cards like Summoner's Art, Creature Seizure, Amulet of Ambition, and Common Charity, all of which are pretty decent normal monster support cards. Although Summoner's Art doesn't work on Gemini monsters since it searches normal monsters from the deck, and Common Charity doesn't work on them because it requires you to banish a normal monster from your hand, which does leave Creature Seizure and Amulet of Ambition to function with them, but neither of these cards were good enough to see competitive play, as Creature Swap was better than Creature Seizure, and Amulet of Ambition is only really good with very high attack, low level monsters like Clown Zombie. Honestly, it seems like the only reason Gemini monsters were thought of as too strong was because of Birthright and maybe Justy Break, which is like a normal monster mirror force and kind of works with Geminis as long as they don't have their effects. And that maybe they thought these cards would be so good with Gemini monsters that they obviously could not give them good effects. Although Gemini monsters were hilariously weak anyway, so they gave them a little bit of a buff. About a year later, they released a structure deck which included Supervise, which is an equipped spell card that immediately grants the Gemini monster equipped to it its effect, and it has a floating effect where if it's sent to the graveyard, you get to special summon a normal monster from your graveyard, which is actually pretty good. The structure deck also reprinted a whole bunch of good normal monster support that was probably meant to help the archetype along, like Birthright, Justy Break, Swing of Memories, and Soul Resurrection, and even brand new series of Gemini monsters, like EVOCATOR CHEVALIER, which has the Gemini effect to send an equipped spell card to the graveyard to destroy one of your opponent's monsters, which has obvious synergy with Supervise and being able to special summon other Gemini monsters from the graveyard by destroying your opponent's cards, which was still not enough to help out the archetype because they still had the inherent flaws of only being normal monsters while on the field or graveyard, and requiring extra normal summons to get their effects off the ground, especially since the cards which were supposed to activate all of their effects, like Unleash Your Power, were too restrictive, and having bad downsides like setting all of the monsters after they gain their effects that turn, when none of them really had effects that were good enough to justify a downside. Unleash Your Power could have just given all the Gemini monsters their effects and not have a downside, and it still wouldn't be very good. So Konami tried again. A year later in 2009, they released a new set which contained a card called Gemini Spark. Gemini Spark allowed you to tribute a level 4 Gemini monster in order to destroy one card in the field and then draw one card. And Gemini Spark was legitimately good. It was quick play, which means you could chain it in response to one of your Gemini monsters getting destroyed by something. It didn't require the Gemini monster to have its effect activated, so it was alive as soon as you got a level 4 Gemini monster on the field. And it allowed you to draw a card after destroying anything, which turned the card into card neutral and card advantage, which gives you some staying power and control in the field while also maintaining card advantage. And with Gemini Spark, Gemini monsters finally started seeing play in hero decks, which leads over to the most successful Gemini monster in the game's history, Elemental Hero Neos Alias. Elemental Hero Neos Alias is a 1900 attack beatstick whose Gemini effect is simply, this card's name becomes Elemental Hero Neos while it's on the field. Seeing as the Neos archetype revolves around having Neos on the field in order to use their contact fusions, this was definitely seen as a good effect, because the original Elemental Hero Neos is a level 7 vanilla monster that's hard to get on the field. So, Neos Alias was supposed to be an easier way of getting that name on the field, but it was almost never used for its Gemini effect. It was mainly used because it was a light hero monster, which was technically useful in order to go into Elemental Hero the Shining, and could be used to activate the effect of Honest to beat over any monster, and because it could combo with Gemini Spark to have some staying power in the field and just be a beatstick. It was played mainly because of everything about the card that didn't have anything to do with its actual effect. There was, however, another Gemini monster that saw some competitive play called Eelblood, which was released alongside the original wave of Gemini monsters, which I think should probably be mentioned as well. Eelblood is a level 6 zombie monster which has a Gemini effect where once per turn you can special summon a zombie monster from your hand or graveyard, with the condition that if Eelblood leaves the field, then all zombie monsters it special summoned are destroyed. And since Eelblood can be brought out of the deck with Pyramid Turtle on its destruction, it was a nice card to end off on during your opponent's turn in order to just use that normal summon on your next turn to activate Eelblood. So, Elemental Hero Neos and Eelblood were the only two Gemini monsters that saw widespread competitive play, and only Eelblood was actually used for its actual Gemini effect. However, there was one other Gemini card which had the potential to be overpowered, and is probably why Gemini monsters were limited in what they could actually accomplish. You see, there's this Gemini card called GIGAPLANT, which was released after the first wave of Gemini monsters, and has the effect that, once per turn, you can special summon one insect or plant monster from your hand or graveyard. This effect is only a soft once per turn, and is not restricting from targeting other copies of itself. So, if you get the Gemini fusion monster on the field called Super Alloy Beast Raptinus, which has the effect to grant all Gemini monsters their Gemini effects. Then, if you simply had two copies of GIGAPLANT on the field, you can infinitely cycle between both of them in order to have an infinite amount of tribute fodder for something like Cannon Soldier or Mass Driver, in order to FDK your opponent. Currently, this is too hard to pull off to be competitively viable, but if they ever made Geminis too strong, then this is something that might be worth worrying about. In 2016, they released some new support with the Chem Critters. These were a series of level 2 and 8 Gemini monsters, which had much better effects that still weren't that great, but they did receive a really good field spell card called Catalyst Field. This effect tried to solve all the problems with Geminis by itself, where it allowed you to summon level 5 or higher Gemini monsters from your hand without tributing. During your main phase, you got one additional normal summon which could be used to summon a Gemini monster, which means it can be used to activate one of their Gemini effects immediately. And then it also allowed you to banish one of your Gemini monsters that had its effect in order to destroy one of your opponent's cards. But the important part about Catalyst Field was the ability to normal summon high-level Gemini monsters without a tribute, and then again an additional normal summon for that turn. They also released a couple of other better high-level Gemini monsters, like Darkstorm Dragon, who could send a spell or trap card on the field to the graveyard to destroy all spells and traps on the field, or Red Eye's Archfiend of Lightning, which could destroy all of your opponent's monsters in the field with a defense lower than its attack. They also got a really good rank 8 monster called Vola Chemi Critter Methi Draco, which allows you to special summon a Gemini monster from your graveyard on its summon, made it so all your Gemini monsters cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects while it had Xyz material, and could detach one of its materials whenever you normal summon a Gemini monster, in order to force your opponent to send a card from their hand or field to the graveyard. None of this was good enough to compete with 2016 meta cards though, so Geminis continue to see no competitive play despite getting a pretty good field spell card and a decent Xyz monster that just wasn't easy enough to summon, since just getting one new field spell card and a couple of mediocre main deck monsters didn't really make their new Xyz monster any more viable. Although, in 2016, Elemental Hero Neos was still occasionally seen competitive play, but it didn't use any of the new Gemini monster support cards, and in fact had stopped using Gemini Spark a long time ago. And then once actual good main deck hero monsters started being released in 2016 and 2017, Elemental Hero Neos Alias was dropped from hero decks completely, and finally stopped seeing widespread competitive play. So with Gemini cards all but dead as a mechanic, Konami released a new support card in 2020 called Gemini Ablation. This is a continuous trap card that has the effect that during the main phase you can discard one card in order to activate one of its two effects. The first effect allows you to special summon any Gemini monster from your deck as an effect monster and it gains its effects. The second allows you to tribute a Gemini monster in order to special summon a Fire War monster from your hand or deck, and then additionally if you tributed a Gemini monster who had its effect gain, you could also destroy one card on the field. So, being able to discard a card in order to bring out a Gemini monster from your deck with its full effect during both players' turns is pretty decent for a continuous trap card. And the second effect has some niche uses as well, as like quasi-Gemini Spark, if you're playing Fire Warrior monsters. And since some of the best Gemini monsters were Fire Warrior, this kinda made sense. Then in 2021, they released Dimer Synthesis, which gives you a way to search out Catalyst Field from your deck, and has a graveyard effect in order to buff the attack of one of your Gemini monsters, which is decent since it technically supports Geminis and searches out their good field spell card. And lastly, they have dualized Lord Gold Knight, one of the last pieces of Gemini support to be released, which is technically not out in the TCG yet, which is simply a 1500 attack Earth Warrior monster, which has a Gemini effect where, if it's summoned, you get to add a spell or trap card with Gemini monster in its text from your deck to your hand. And then it becomes a machine type monster and gains 500 attack. So, if you special summon it from the deck with Gemini Ablation, it gives the Gemini archetype a way to actually search out cards, including something like Gemini Spark, which could then immediately be used on Gold Knight. So, the best pieces of support they ever released for Gemini monsters were Gemini Spark, Gemini Ablation, and the field spell card Catalyst Field. And if these three support cards were released at the first wave of Gemini monsters, then we might have had an actual history where Geminis were a legitimate meta threat. But all of these cards were released too far away from each other, and at times where the effects were not that special. Say for Gemini Spark, and maybe Gemini Ablation too. Being able to special summon a monster once per turn from your deck during both players' turns is actually super good, and would be kinda broken if it was attached to anything besides Gemini monsters. Now, in conclusion, why did the Gemini mechanic fail? Because they require two summons, and are too restrictive in how they are treated as normal monsters. It's really that two normal summon thing which really hampers the entire thing. The normal summon is incredibly valuable. You only get one normal summon per turn by default, and there are a lot of cards which gain a whole bunch of advantage off of a single normal summon, like Alistair the Invoker for example. So having to give up that normal summon in order to activate the effect of a card better be worth the activation of that card's effect, which almost none of the Gemini monsters were, besides Eelblood or Gigaplant, and only because those two cards allow you to summon another monster immediately, so it's kinda like trading a normal summon for a special summon of another monster from a different location. So in order for Gemini monsters to see more competitive play, they'd either have to release some absolutely disgusting normal monster support, which just unintentionally worked very well with Gemini monsters, or make more Gemini monsters that have really good effects, because they do have some really good Gemini-specific support with Gemini Ablation. The funny thing is, they did actually release a whole archetype that supports normal monsters, but it's actually worded in a way to only support non-effect monsters. So, none of the 10U cards work with Gemini monsters since they aren't counted as non-effect monsters, as they have an effect which treats them as a normal monster, which is technically not the same thing. I will say though, one thing they could do to Gemini monsters to make them better, or to make an actual good Gemini archetype, would be to take advantage of the fact that they are treated as effect monsters in the hand, and just give them a whole bunch of hand effects like they did with the Necros ritual monsters. And also more cards like Gemini Ablation, which allow you to bring out Gemini monsters easier and also grant their effects immediately, so that you'd never have to waste normal summon on giving a Gemini monster its Gemini effect.